Blog Talk Radio.
Well, hello, and welcome back to the Divas That Care. My name is Candace Gish, and I'm the host and founder of this particular program. You know, I'm just so excited each and every one of you has tuned in today. We have an amazing, brand new young diva that we're going to be welcoming to our family today from Australia. And this amazing woman is doing extraordinary things, and I can't wait for you to get to know her. For any of you that have just tuned in for the very first time, our program has been running now for 9 years. And in 2020, we're actually going to be expanding our platform to include 20 hosts on our program. And we're just beyond excited. And I can't wait for you to listen to all these amazing women that are going to be, interviewing others from around the world. So make sure you check them out at divasthatcare.com. Well, let's get started. This amazing young lady I was saying is from Australia. Her name is McKinley Butson. I hope I said that, McKinley, and properly. So I'm just really excited to be having this young lady join our program today. I had the opportunity to kind of go through some of her social media to check her out, and oh my goodness, I'm beyond inspired of what she is doing out there. So welcome to the show, McKinley. I'm just, happy to have you.
Hi, no, thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be on.
Well, would you spend a couple of minutes sharing who you are with all of our listeners today?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is McKinley Butson. As you mentioned, I do live in Australia. I'm from a little coastal town or city called Wollongong, which is absolutely lovely. And, I've lived here my whole life. And basically, I'm a bit of an inventor. I'm only 19, so it sounds a bit strange to be saying that, especially when I am still have actually just started my college and just finished my freshman year. But I've been doing science and inventing for pretty much as long as I can remember. As a toddler and as a kid, I was always incredibly curious about the world. So that was one of, the joys of living in not a huge city, is I would always be outside in our backyard or in the bush across the road, exploring and, asking my parents, why is the sky blue? Why does this grow here? All of these really quite often quite random questions. But they basically began to foster. They noticed that I was incredibly naturally curious, and so they fostered that quality which was inside me. And so what I started doing was performing, little kind of science experiments, I suppose. Originally, this was the very stereotypical baking soda and vinegar kind of volcano experiment on the kitchen bench, which ends up extremely messy. And unfortunately, Mum did most of the cleaning up at that stage. So I'm appreciative of her patience, and she learned to clean pretty much anything, I think. But soon they moved on from experiments like that. One day, how my specifically inventing journey actually started, it stemmed from a bit of a strange obsession. So when I was about 6 or 7 years old, had an obsession with sunglasses. And I had probably about 15 pairs. So honestly, too many for a 6-year-old to have. And it got to the point where Mum had said, look, we're not buying you any more sunglasses, money doesn't grow on trees. And that wasn't exactly a concept that I understood yet. So I was like, that's not fair. Fine then, if you won't. And I basically said back to her, I said, if you won't buy me any, I'll make my own then. And what started off as probably a bit of a sassy comment actually turned into the beginning of my scientific journey. So I began researching sunglasses, and I decided that I was going to make a pair of sunglasses so that I would never need to buy another pair. And that was my first invention. I created a pair of variable tint sunglasses where basically you could adjust the darkness that you wanted them to be depending on the day. Again, that was when I was in year 2, so I was 7 years old when I finished that. And then from there, I've moved on, though, from problems which just kind of, were my own personal bubble problems, and started looking into ways that I can use my passion for STEM and inventing to help the world. So that's ranged from projects working in radiotherapy and improving outcomes for breast cancer patients to solving the global drinking water crisis and trying to provide safe and potable drinking water for developing communities, to environmental issues such as protecting seedlings without the use of harmful chemical pesticides. So basically it's just been whatever problem I've thought worthwhile and I've wanted to tackle at that time, and then using my passion for STEM and inventing to do so and try to make the world a bit of a better place.
Oh my God.
That's probably my story in a nutshell.
Well, you know what? Your story in a nutshell is absolutely mind-blowing. I'll be honest with you. I've talked to a lot of amazing people, and it is just always inspiring when I can hear these stories. And, a lot of the listeners now are like dropping their jaws and they're like, what? Look at all she's done, and look at in the short period of time of 19 years. And, you've done so much and you've used your curiosity. And I think that's what I love the most, is that you've been really curious about things and you've found ways to figure things out. And I think the human brain is absolutely amazing, and you're utilizing that fact. And with STEM, I always tell our listeners, I have 4 daughters, and my one daughter is similar in the aspect. She is very motivated by math and science. She just absolutely loves it. She's so curious and always wanting to figure it out. And, she's always telling me, I'm going to be an aerospace engineer, Mom. I want to do this. This is what I want to do. I want to invent things. I want to figure things out. And I'm like, I just love it. I love hearing the passion in an individual's voice when they share that. And I can hear that in your voice. And it brings a smile to my face, because I love it. I absolutely love it. And, I want to talk more about that, because you have created some amazing things. I really want to talk about the smart armor. That is something that I was finding quite interesting. And I do want to dive into a whole bunch of the other projects you're working on. But can you kind of share with our listeners a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the Smart Armour was a project which I originally began when I was in year 10. And it's basically what the end goal was, and what happened was I created a device, Smart Armour, which stands for Scale Male Armour for Radiation Therapy. Basically what it is it's designed to improve outcomes for radiotherapy breast cancer patients who are going through treatment. One of the unfortunate side effects and kind of unavoidable side effects during treatment is that areas outside of the breast that has cancer unfortunately receive radiation as a part of their treatment. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still that radiation that they do receive, definitely it's still needed to get their treatment. Of course, battling cancer is an incredibly difficult journey, and so trying to rid of that cancer in that breast is the most important. So unfortunately, this is a necessary side effect, I suppose, at the moment. But what I wanted to do was create a device or try to solve a problem of this excess radiation that they were receiving, because this can have the potential to cause things like extreme skin burning, which can be quite uncomfortable and quite painful in cases. And of course, we all know there's a lot in the media about radiation, and we all know that any radiation exposure is going to be bad for us. And so trying to minimize that to reduce the risk of future cancers forming or any possible other side effects is incredibly important. So this device is able to do that. It's able to reduce the dose to what's called the contralateral breast. That's just a fancy word for the breast that's not being treated, by up to 80%. And so that would potentially have the impact of being able to improve the outcomes for these patients. And to try and give people a picture of what it looks like, imagine something from Game of Thrones. That's quite often what I get told. Or something like it's called scale mail. So it does kind of look like scales, like dragon scales, and it's made out of copper. So it's got that kind of bronze, rose gold tint to it.
I love it. I was looking at some pictures of that. And can I ask you, why did you decide to do this? Or why were you so curious about that?
Yeah, look, it started, originally it just started as a conversation over the dinner table. My dad works in the medical physics field, and so he was one day just describing some of the problems and difficulties that they encountered during treatment. And so I, in that moment, kind of decided if something hadn't already been done about it, I couldn't quite understand why something hadn't already been done about it. And so I decided to apply myself and see if I could do anything. And so from there, it's pretty much gone on from there ever since. I have been working on it for I started in year 10, so about 4 years now. We've been working on it and busy trying to get it to the stage where it's ready to be used. And so at the moment, what we're doing is we're looking for a hospital who's willing to basically partner with us and run a pilot study. So we have been fortunate enough to have a paper published on the Smart Armour. We have approval from particularly, in Australia, from the Therapeutic Goods Administration, which is essentially the equivalent of like the FDA. And we have a patent on it in a couple of various countries. So what we're looking for now is just to have a hospital who's willing to take that first step, do a pilot study or use it on a patient. We have all of the relevant testing and numbers that confirm. That's where we're at the moment.
Oh my goodness. Well, I love what you're doing, and to think that you're continuing to do this and to really get it out there. What I'm going to do with our social media too is share this project that you're trying to get out there, because I think it's really important. I've had the fortunate of knowing quite a few doctors in my life, so I'm definitely going to be sending or spreading the word, I guess you could say, to some of my friends that may be interested in helping you out in this program. I just think it's absolutely a fantastic thing. And with the number of women that do develop breast cancer, I think it's on your website, it was saying 1 in 8 women. And it is definitely something that we don't want them to have that. And we want it to make the journey of this as painless as possible.
Exactly. And that was that was one of the motivations behind my project. I think the day that I remember someone asking me, and they were like, well, what happens when we cure cancer and, your device is no longer needed? And, my response to that was basically that will be, the day that my device is, and the Smart Armour is pretty much useless because we've cured cancer, will be the best day of my life.
Oh my goodness,
I think a lot of people are looking for a cure for cancer at the moment, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And I think I just wanted to do something to help the people who are on that journey at the moment, and who will have to go through that journey, because it touches more than just the people who are going through it, their lives. I think most people can probably say they know someone who has been through cancer. That's how common it is. Breast cancer is the most common form of cancer in women, and overall is the second most common. So it's definitely something which is close to a lot of people's hearts. And the Smart Armour is, it's so incredibly easy to use. It's not expensive. It kind of ticks all of the boxes to, try to help women through what's already an incredibly difficult time.
Well, I love what you're doing, and I think you've got a big heart to be doing stuff like that and to continuing to develop it to make it even better all the time. And I want to ask you how you find the time to do this. I know as being a student, there's a lot involved with being a student. There's a lot of studying, and obviously this isn't just the only project you're working on. You mentioned renewable energy, and I want to talk more about that too, because it's something that a lot of people are talking about nowadays. But before we get into that, how do you find the time to put into all of this?
Yeah, look, obviously it's incredibly difficult, and I don't pretend that I have, the perfect recipe for a fantastic work-life personal balance. I think that's something which is a lifelong journey of figuring that out. So it's definitely something I'm still working on. But I think for me, one of the biggest differences was, and this is going to sound strange, but for me, science and inventing was almost like one of my hobbies. So, whilst other people might, classically do a sport or play an instrument, my main thing, I suppose, that I would do in my spare time was to invent things. That was my interest, my hobby, and so that's really where it all started from. It was just something that I really loved doing in my spare time, and so I would dedicate that time to it. Obviously, that as you become older and have to have more school commitments and such, that did become slightly more difficult. But I think it's one of those things that if you have enough passion and love for something, you'll find the time to do it. And so that's really just...
Oh, I agree with that.
That's why I was doing it. that kind of, I suppose it's that saying, find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And that's kind of how I see it.
Well, you know what? I think you're a very wise individual, and to share that with all of our listeners is fantastic, because I know that we do have quite a few young listeners in our program, and I think you've just inspired a lot of new young girls going into that field. I think it's so important. Yeah. I think we definitely need more minds like yours in the field, and to see what's going to happen and what people can invent. Now let's talk about your renewable energy. Tell me a little bit about that and what kind of ideas you have going on there.
Absolutely. So this was actually something which I started looking into renewable energy way back when I was in middle school. So when I was in year 6, it was one of my first, I suppose, bigger projects I was very excited about. And I was looking basically just at solar panels and what affected the efficiency of them, how they performed, because I think at that time, particularly in Australia, they were becoming a lot more common for people to, I suppose, for, everyday families to have on their roof. It was kind of becoming just a more normal thing. And so what I originally wanted to look at was, okay, we have obviously renewable energy is hopefully going to be the way of the future. We can't keep living on fossil fuels forever, but I wanted to really take a kind of objective look at, well, if a solar panel's up on our roof all day, what's actually affecting how much power it can output. So I was looking at things like how does rain, like if it rains and there's water on the solar panel, how does that affect it? Quite often I knew, at least with our solar panels that we had on our roof, no one went up and really cleaned them like we would inside. And so I was saying, well, if they're up on the roof all day, surely they're getting a lot of dust on them, or that sort of collecting over time, and that might block sunlight. So how does that affect it? And then things as well like heat. Obviously in the Australian summer sun, it gets incredibly, incredibly hot. And so I wanted to look at how temperature as well affected the power output of the solar panel. And I found some pretty interesting things in that temperature. I found for at least our roof got up to about 80 degrees Celsius, which I'm not quite sure what that is in Fahrenheit, but I can tell you it's very hot. I suppose for a comparison, in Celsius water boils at 100 degrees, so it's not far off that. And so that affected the solar panel's efficiency. The numbers were a long time ago. This was about 6 or 7 years ago, but I believe it was by about 20%, which when you're looking at all of those other factors as well, which were decreasing its output, it became a lot, and it was quite concerning. And so what I did for that original project was basically looking at how I could increase the output of the solar panel back then. But what that project grew into was not just looking at renewable energy, but then I decided to apply that. And so I created a bit of a system as to how I could increase the output of the solar panel. And then I decided, okay, well, now that this was a couple of years on, I kind of came back to that similar problem, and I was like, okay, so now I've actually figured out how I can increase the output of the solar panel. Why don't I try to apply this to something else as well? And so that's where my actual my research into the water crisis and drinking water for developing communities started, which they seem like two completely different issues, which they are. But I was looking into, if I am able to generate this extra power from a solar panel, that could potentially be applied to areas, particularly developing countries, where access to electricity is already expensive and quite limited. So it would be maximising their availability. And potentially, in my case, I decided to focus on cleaning and sanitising water. And so what I did, that project lasted for about, I spent over various different times, I spent about 3 or 4 years on it, and ended up coming up with a system which is able to provide both safe potable drinking water as well as medical grade sterile water for a developing community in a completely self-sustainable and renewable system.
Wow. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I love what your hobby's done for you or brought to you, and all this amazing ideas, because, girl, you're going to change the world. The things that you are doing is absolutely amazing. Congratulations on everything that you're doing. I'm listening to your story. I think I have this big permagrin on my face because I'm like, wow. It's when I listen to amazing, amazing young women like yourself, I am just beyond inspired and empowered to see what the future is going to bring, because I know you guys are going to do so many great things.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely something I, have come across in my journey. Watching the news, sometimes it can seem a bit depressing, or the future can seem a bit dire. But I think throughout a lot of my journey, and having the opportunity to speak, I suppose, on podcasts like this, or speak to such a wide range of people, it helps you to realize that the future's not quite so dire, and there are so many amazing people out there doing awesome things to make the world a better place. And I think
there definitely is.
We just need to share more of these stories, I think.
You know what? That's exactly what I think too. And I think it's that trickling effect and being inspired by another person out there. And when you lock arms, amazing, extraordinary things can take place. And I can see that with all the inventions that you have going on. I'm going to ask you, what is next for you? What are you wanting to do after all this?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a strange journey. I think I'm not exactly quite sure. And purely for the reason, if you had have asked me 5 years ago if this is where I would have been, I probably never would have guessed it. So obviously I've been doing this inventing, I suppose, more science work pretty much my whole life. It's been a norm. But it wasn't until end of 2017, actually, that I actually started, I suppose my invention started coming under the spotlight, and people started recognizing my name a little bit more. I was fortunate enough to have there were probably three occasions which I would say probably changed the trajectory of my life a little bit. One of them was I was fortunate enough to compete at the International Science and Engineering Fair, which is actually hosted in the US each year. And I was in the category of translational medicine. I placed first with the Smart Armour, and that was the first time an Australian had done that, which was absolutely incredible and something I never would have expected. And that was that started bringing a bit more attention to the Smart Armour. And I was then asked to give a TED Talk in Sydney, and was awarded after that the New South Wales Young Australian of the Year Award for 2018. And I think those three instances definitely, I would say, changed my life, in that I was, at that time, very heavily involved in the STEM and the science and the inventing, but none of my projects had really gone beyond my backyard as such. So they were all just staying with me for a little bit. It was my passion, my hobby, but I hadn't pushed them out there yet. And if you had have asked me at that stage if this is where I would have ended up, I probably would have said no. Back then, I can definitely tell you as well, since then I've had the opportunity to do a lot more public speaking, interviews about my story, and really having the opportunity to try to inspire particularly other young girls to, I suppose, not necessarily follow in my footsteps, but help them to realize their potential, and, they have the ability to make a difference. And it doesn't matter that, they're a girl or that they're young. They're not, I don't think they're ever barriers. They are hurdles, but they're never something that should stop you. And so I've had so many amazing opportunities to, go out and speak life into a lot of people. And that's something which I never would have said would have had the opportunity for. In fact, if you had have asked me a couple of years ago if I wanted to be doing public speaking, it probably would have been the last thing I would have said yes to. Public speaking used to be my personal idea of the worst day ever. I, as well, and this is something which I share particularly with younger girls. During that period of time, when I was actually after giving a TED Talk, I was going through very, very heavy anxiety, which again is another incredibly common issue, particularly in teenagers. And so I was going through that, and what people don't actually know, which is I can look back and laugh at it now, but after I had given my TED Talk, I had panicked myself so much because, again, public speaking was my idea of the worst day ever. When I actually walked off stage, everyone had applauded. I had walked off stage and I actually fainted because I had worked myself up so much about it. So I don't actually quite remember a lot about what happened after the speech. But I think, it's things like that I want to share as well. Everyone, quite often, you see, I suppose people would see the social media or they see the end product, I suppose, of what's happened through the journey. But I think everyone, I feel it's really important as well to, communicate. I am human. I have gone through things like anxiety and, I have good days and bad days like everyone. And so those things, again, aren't necessarily barriers, but I see them as hurdles. I've been able to grow so much through that. But that's what I mean. If you're asking me where I'd be in another 5 years, I don't think I have the ability to comment on that, purely because I think if I say something, it's going to be completely wrong. I know definitely at the moment I'm still obviously continuing with the projects that I have up and running at the moment and looking at getting them implemented because that wasn't necessarily something as much that I had done in the past. So at the moment, we're looking at getting Smart Armour implemented. I have another project called the Soda Sticker, which is also looking at developing safe drinking water for developing communities. Also getting that one up and running and hopefully on the ground soon as well. So they're probably the main focuses. But as always, I do have a couple of things up my sleeve for potential research that we'll see how they pan out. I've actually just started my holidays from university.
Yes.
So that's exciting times for me because it means I have more time all of a sudden.
Oh my goodness, to keep going. Well, you know what? I think that these awards that you've received are well deserved. You sound extraordinary, and I want to thank you so much for being my guest on today's show, because you definitely opened my eyes to so many things, McKinley, and I'm just so grateful that you took the time today, because I know that you do have a lot of time that you want to be doing other things, and to be talking with us today, I'm just very grateful. And I want to thank you from everybody from the Divas That Care. We're very excited to have you a part of our family now, and I hope that you come back on our program again to share more things with us.
No, thank you so much. It's my absolute pleasure, and of course, I'd love to stay involved with this community.
Oh, we would love that, and I'm hoping that you'll come into our virtual summit, be a part of that in 2020 when we have all of our amazing young divas participate in that program and share it with all of our listeners.
It'd be fantastic.
Well, thank you so much again. I want to thank you also to all of our listeners that took the time to listen to today's program. I hope that you take this program and you send it to your family and friends. That's what we do at the Divas That Care, is that we support one another, and we love to provide another platform for all these amazing women to share their stories on the things that they're doing in the world. And we're a big part of that, and we love to support them. So thank you again to McKinley. Thank you to all of our listeners. I hope that each and every one of you has a very Merry Christmas and a great 2020. Until next time, please do something kind for somebody out there. Bye-bye for now.